Yo, what up guys? This is a new series I'm starting called How to Build Your 4-Star. If you want to suggest a 4-star that I should do a guide on next, be sure to join my Discord, link in the description, to vote on the next guide. As you saw from the title, we'll be starting off with Bennett, so let's just hop right into it. So Bennett is actually one of the few 4-stars that you can build as both a support and a main DPS. So I'll be covering both options. I'll be covering support first because I think that's his better role, but I'll cover his DPS options later on in the video. Timestamps, of course, will be in the description. Okay, so I'd like to start off with his kit because I feel like it's important to understand his kit so that you understand why we build him the way we do. So we'll start off with normal attacks, the usual, nothing special. Okay, skill. His skill is just pyro damage, nothing really, no extra effects, but just a slash of pyro damage. Now you can hold it, and you can hold it for like multiple charges, but I'd highly recommend just stick with the press. The press is infinitely better than the other charges, even with the Constellation that adds the extra hit. Just stick with the press. The press is good. His ult. Now this is what makes Bennett Bennett. Okay, so this is great because it's a simple jumping attack. There's no crazy animation. He's only a 4-star, although he does play like a 5-star. And he slams the ground, pyro damage, and he creates the field. Now inside this field, characters that are below 70% health, they will be healed very quickly, continuously, with this tick heal that he can provide. Now this tick heal does scale of his max HP, but it's important to note that if your character is above 70% HP, he can't heal. He can heal you if you're at like 68% and take you to like 80%, but he can't heal past that point. Meanwhile, characters above 70% health, they're going to get an attack bonus. Now this attack bonus scales off Bennett's base attack being your weapon base attack plus your character base attack. So it's something that you can't really upgrade, really, besides your weapon and leveling up your character. So, for example, my Bennett has 544. That's because of him, plus 388 from the Festering Desire at level 70 out of 70. So, another great thing is that it constantly imbues characters within the AoE with Pyro. Now, this is what's called a cleanse. Cleanse meaning that you can ignore effects such as the ones in floor 11 of the Spiral Abyss, the electro field that is, constantly draining your energy away so that you can't use your elemental burst with your other characters. By using the elemental burst with Bennett, you can have characters within the burst ignore those effects so you can take on these floors a little easier. In terms of weapon options for Bennett, he can use a lot of different weapons, mainly any 4-star really that has energy recharge. He can use Festering Desire extremely well. Sacrificial Sword if it's not being used by characters that need it more. And Favonia's Sword, all being relatively accessible, especially the Festering Desire if you took part in the event. Now, if you're lucky enough to have the Aquila Favonia, the Scoured Blade, or the Summit Shaper, go ahead and use those. Higher base attack from these 5-star weapons means that his attack buffs that he's going to be giving out are going to be bigger. So, if you don't have any of the weapons mentioned so far, the best recommendation I have is that you go for Prototype Ranker, but make sure in terms of artifacts, you go for the 2-piece Exile with the 2-piece Scholar to make up for the lack of energy recharge that you would have had with any of these other weapons. So, for the people out there thinking about using the Scarab Sword, I'd highly advise you don't. Again, it's a 3-star weapon, so base attack is much lower, which means your buffs are going to be weaker. So, although it does have energy recharge and that might look nice, long term, it's a 3-star weapon, your buffs are going to be weaker, so it's not that great. Now, moving on to artifacts. Artifacts are what makes a character, essentially. And for Bennett's support, Noblesse Oblige 4-piece is what you should be aiming for every time, unless you have to use Exile and Scholar to make up for your weapon. You want to be going for Noblesse 4-piece because it means you're just buffing your team even more. On your Flower and Feather, you want to be prioritizing stats such as HP percent and energy recharge, with elemental mastery being kind of a luxury on Bennett. Whereas on your sands, you want to be going for HP percent with as much energy recharge, and same thing for your goblet. Now on your circlet, this is where you don't want to do what I've done. You want to try and get a healing bonus hat. I'm only using this hat right now because it has energy recharge and it gives me the 4-piece buff from the set bonus. But you really want to be going for a stat like healing bonus, or even HP percent if you've got a HP percent one with good stats. In terms of constellations for Bennett, C1 Bennett is incredible because it means you're constantly giving out this attack buff regardless of whether they are above or below 70% HP, and the buff just gets stronger. Another great constellation is C5. It's just increases the level of your ult, which means you're going to be healing more, giving bigger buffs. Incredible. Now a key thing to mention here is that C6 can mess up certain team compositions. Some teams you don't want to be infused with pyro, so that's something to watch out for. So I'd always recommend, for the longevity of your Bennett, unless they release a change so that you can take away constellations, I just leave him at C5 for now, because C6 could potentially hurt you in the long run. As for talent priority, don't level up his auto attacks. They're kind of negligible with support Bennett. You're not really going to be using them. Whereas his skill, you'll be using, substantially. So I'd say level to 6. Don't go higher. I'd say just stop at 6. Don't waste any more resources. But get his burst as high as you can. Now with the build complete, I would like to talk about teammates for Bennett. Now Bennett works with essentially everyone in the game. No one dislikes being on the same team as Bennett because Bennett just buffs your team. The only case I can think where you might not want Bennett is, for example, with Hu Tao. Hu Tao maybe would like to be at below 50% HP to get access to that talent, whereas Bennett is obviously going to heal you to 70%. So that's something to definitely consider. Now DPS Bennett does require different talent priorities, so if you're going to build him DPS, I'd like you to take note that you're going to be using his skill the most. This is where your damage is going to be coming from vaporizing and melting using his skill. So you're going to focus on his skill mainly. You want to get this to as high as you can, and then you want to focus on your burst and your auto attacks somewhat equally, but you still want to focus on your burst a little bit more to buff Bennett himself more. Now, in terms of weapons for DPS Bennett, he can use 3 5-stars extremely well, being Aquila Favonia, Summit Shaper, and in my opinion the best weapon for DPS Bennett being the Primordial Jade Cutter. But those are 5-star weapons, so I'm going to give you amazing 4-star options which are both extremely accessible. Now the first one is Festering Desire. This was available from the Dragon Spine event, so if you did miss it, don't worry, I do have another option. But this weapon is incredible because it increases your skill damage and increases your crit rate using your skill, which is most important for Bennett, and it's also got energy recharge on it, which is nice. Now the other weapon is one I don't have. It's called the Iron Sting. It's the other craftable sword besides the prototype ranker. You can actually make this, and at higher refinements with the right build, it is better than the Festering Desire. But prototypes are hard to come by, so if you do have the Festering Desire, I'd just say level the Festering Desire because it can be used for both support and DPS Bennett. Now, what artifacts should you use on DPS Bennett? Well, it's gotta be Crimson Witch of Flames. It's one of the better artifact sets in the game. For obvious reasons, it's just ridiculous. You get the pyro damage bonus for the 2-piece, it increases your vaporize and melt damage, and it rewards you for using your elemental skill multiple times in the span of 10 seconds. So this fits perfectly for a character like DPS Bennett. This is incredible. So in terms of substats, you want to prioritize attack percent, elemental mastery, and then you also want to try and get a little bit of energy recharge so that you can ult and buff yourself up. So you want to focus on those 3 main stats. HP percent is no longer a priority really because it's only Bennett that needs to keep Bennett alive. In terms of your sands, if you are using the Festering Desire, then you want Elemental Mastery as the main stat here. But if you're using the Iron Sting, you want to instead go for attack percent here. And in terms of your Goblet, you're always going to go Pyro damage. Just try and get as much Pyro damage as you can for this DPS Bennett build. And then Circlet, you're going to want crit rate, crit damage. Just try and get to that golden 1-to-2 ratio and you'll be fine. Now Constellations for DPS Bennett, C1 and C5 are still great, with now C3 being very nice to have now because it boosts your skill level by 3, which just increases your damage. Now again, C6, you might think, okay, if you're using Bennett DPS, then you know it's okay to use this. Well, it's not that simple, because if you're using Chung Yun as your support to get melts, you won't be able, it will completely cancel out, because this constellation overrides Chung Yun's skill, so you won't be able to get melts anymore when you ult, which is obviously very detrimental. In terms of characters that Bennett enjoys as teammates, you have characters like Chung Yun and Xing Cho. These are the two main characters that I'd say are most important for Bennett. But then you also have options like Kaya if you're a free to play, and you have Kaya. Kaya's ult can also, you know, get these melts off, which is where you're going to be getting all your damage from. So in terms of how to play Bennett, Bennett is extremely intuitive. So I don't really feel like I need to give a how to play. Just you want to burst as much as often. Now I do have one tip though. If you are using him as a support, you want to do this. So let's say I have my burst up, you want to do skill and then burst, so you can switch as soon as possible. And Bennett picked up the energy. You see how his burst has already started building up? You want to do that if you're using support. Whereas the opposite is true for a DPS Bennett. DPS Bennett, you want to ult and then skill, so that you have his skill cooldown reduced, so you can skill more, like this. So that about wraps up the Bennett guide. I hope this helped at least someone with how to build Bennett. I hope you guys know what you're doing now. And if you guys have any other questions, you can find me in my Discord. I'll drop the Discord server in the description. You can also find me at my Twitch, twitch.tv/xdralive. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I love answering these questions, and I love helping out other people with what to do. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if the video helped out. And we'll be continuing this series with 4 stars that are voted on in my Discord by viewers.